Assalamualaikum and hi to Madam Ellie. In this video, we would like to present about the banking crisis of Iceland in 2008. First, let me introduce my teammate. From our left, Afarina Hadira binti Azman, Nur Ili Izzati binti Azhar, and me myself, Nurhaiza binti Nuruddin. Before we start our presentation, let me briefly explain our agenda. I will cover the introduction part and pass it to Afarina Hadira to explain the history of how the crisis happened. As for the causes, I will summarize and point out three main causes behind the crisis, and Ili Izzati will give the policy recommendation and conclude everything for this presentation. Moving on to the next slide. Since Iceland institutions were completely run private, they began to growing rapidly with the majority of the expansion occurring outside of the Iceland. Icelandic banks purchased financial enterprise in other regions, built subsidiaries, and grew their international company. This fast expansion was aided by Iceland's participation in the European Economic Area (EEA). The operating permits conferred to Icelandic financial companies enlarged not only to Iceland but also to all other EEA states. Next, I will pass to Afarina Hadira.
Thank you Haiza for the introduction. Hi and Assalamualaikum to those who are watching this video. My name is Afarina. In this part of the presentation, I'll be presenting about the financial history that leads to the financial crisis in Iceland. As we all know about the title of this presentation, which is the financial crisis in Iceland in 2008, it is known as the worst financial catastrophe to hit since the end of the World War II. During this crisis, it is estimated in euros the fiscal cost of the financial crisis amount to 65% of GDP, while foreign debt has increased to over 100% of GDP, and the economy is predicted to contract by 15% in krona terms. This has led to the expectation of the increment in the unemployment rate. Before 2008, Iceland also had experienced a turbulent 20th century due to unstable inflation. Thus, the central banks of advanced nations utilized the framework of inflation targeting to produce low, predictable, and stable inflation rates in order to control the unpredictable and erratic inflation rate. Moving on, the central bank also increased the general interest rate to counteract inflationary pressures. However, they still failed to keep the inflation rate within the desired range. Hence, due to the high domestic interest rate, domestic businesses and households borrowed foreign cash. Due to this act, economic growth and inflationary pressures were inflated by a combination of a significant inflow of foreign currency, currency appreciation, and high domestic interest rates. Subsequently, the krona has increased in value while this has been happening and has signaled a rapid over-appreciation of the currency. One study suggested that the central bank should increase its foreign reserve holdings in such an unfavorable macroeconomic climate as protection against the potential of a sharp currency decline. However, all the noticeable symptoms have been shown. The central bank still missed the numerous opportunities to enhance the amount of foreign reserve that may have stopped the local currency devaluation. Rapid currency devaluation became unavoidable when the financial crisis broke out in the late 2008 and early 2009. Please bear with me in telling the history of this financial crisis. So, due to the rapid currency devaluation, three largest commercial banks in Iceland, Kaupthing, Glitnir, and Landsbanki, experienced severe solvency and liquidity. To show how severe the financial crisis is, as much as 900% of the nation's annual GDP is represented on the balance sheet of the banking industry. Apart from that, the hold-to-maturity value of the assets was insufficient to meet its commitments, which was the main cause of the Icelandic banking sector's insolvency. As a result, major commercial banks were unable to find short-term funding as the banking industry started to exhibit signs of bankruptcy and liquidity issues, and as the krona continued to decline. This causes the currency devaluation to lead to a sharp rise in inflation. Next, I will pass to Haiza to explain more about what are the causes that lead to this financial crisis.
Thank you, Dira. I can point out three main causes behind this crisis. First, the mismatched regulation and failure to forecast. The ultimate cause of Iceland's financial crisis should be sought in the failure of the central bank's mismatched regulation and its failure to forecast the prospect of the financial crisis in a series of economic policy inadequacies. Second, the high interest rate. Strong inflation expectation, while interest rates were already high and economic growth was vigorous, mean that the financial outlook was supercharged. In normal circumstances, the central bank would raise the interest rate to prevent further inflation expectation. Finally, irresponsible banking practice. The corrupt manner of their privatization, the ineffectiveness of financial supervision, which is best described as having been designed to fail, the effects of their risky action were felt by society as a whole. The Icelandic banks largely ignored restriction because they were backed by the government. Next, I will pass to Ili Izzati.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Ili Izzati. I will continue with the policy recommendation. The financial sector may benefit from policy recommendations since they can give suggestions on how to minimize and avoid future banking crises. For the first recommendation, each bank should establish the role of chief risk officer. And what is important is that it is necessary to set up a system that enables the officer to speak with the board directly, serving as internal control. Banks can reduce their risk of a banking crisis and any financial losses by creating these positions for chief risk officers because there will be someone in charge to take over and control it. Moreover, the chief risk officer is also in charge of implementing the bank's overall risk governance plan, setting up the risk management system, and overseeing compliance. The second one is to make changes to the bank's organizational structure. Bank organizational structures need to be changed in order for the institution to improve and develop a strategy for stronger planning and policy. Since changes have been made that strengthen the effectiveness of bank management, regulators can act immediately during challenging times without having to deal with the complexity of the existing structures. The third recommendation is the ability and timing to sell off the new public banks will depend on market conditions. Establishing a long-term government-owned control may be feasible. In that scenario, the government will be responsible for ensuring that corporate governance procedures within the banks are altered. This responsibility should be given to a new administrative team, who should be able to plan and perform any needed adjustment. Policymakers need to support the suggestion since it can help the bank better prepare and develop further practical measures to prevent banking crises in the future. Last but not least is in the upcoming rehabilitation phase. Public financial education must be prioritized along with adjustment to governance and rules. It is essential to establish an independent authority free from the risk of financial backing for the purpose of collecting, analyzing, and distributing reliable information to stakeholders. Not only that, but those with more expertise would react quickly and more intelligently, as well as be better able to see the need to improve governing and regulatory structures. In conclusion, we can say that the 2008 Icelandic banking crisis undoubtedly had a negative impact on the country's financial and economic system. The crisis caused a serious economic downturn in Iceland, a sharp decline in the value of its currency, and a near complete suspension of foreign exchange activities for several weeks. Iceland, however, continued in its effort to overcome the banking crisis. Thus, the banking crisis in Iceland will significantly increase awareness among banks in other nations that they should take precautions to avoid such problems in the future. That's all from us. Thank you for listening.